The night was quiet, and the human man walked alone through the edge of the forest. His name was Daniel. He often came here after work, carrying a small lamp and an old rifle, not because he wanted to hunt, but because the land was dangerous. Strange things sometimes wandered close to the human settlements, and Daniel liked to be careful. On this night, the wind was colder than usual. The moonlight fell across the empty road that cut through the trees. Daniel stopped when he heard something, a soft cry, almost like a child's whimper. At first, he thought it might be a lost animal, but then he heard it again. This time it was clearer, fragile and trembling. It was the sound of a little girl crying. Daniel tightened his grip on the lamp and followed the sound. His boots pressed against the dry leaves, making crunching noises that echoed in the silence. The deeper he went, the stronger the crying became. Suddenly, the light from his lamp caught movement behind a cluster of stones. There, crouched on the ground, was a woman, but she was not human. Her skin had a pale, faint glow, almost silver in the moonlight. Her hair was dark, long and tangled as if she had been running for days. Chains still clung loosely around her wrists, broken at the ends, and in her arms, pressed tightly against her chest, was a small child. The little girl's face was thin, her cheeks hollow and her eyes half closed with weakness. She looked no older than 6. She was shaking from hunger and cold. The woman rocked her gently, whispering words in a language Daniel did not understand. But when her eyes lifted to Daniel, they were filled with both fear and desperation. For a moment, nobody moved. Daniel's heart pounded as he realized what he was seeing: an alien woman and her child. He had heard stories, how some alien survivors wandered after wars, abandoned and unwanted, but never before had he come this close to one. Then slowly, the woman spoke in broken human words. Her voice was dry and rough, but the meaning cut straight into his chest. Human. "Please, just feed my daughter," she begged. "She is hungry. She will die." Daniel blinked, unsure if he heard correctly. The woman clutched her daughter tighter, and her voice trembled as she continued, almost choking on her words. "I will stay quiet. I will cook. I will stay in your bed, anything. Just feed her." Her words struck him like a blade. Daniel stood frozen, staring at her. The alien woman was proud even in her suffering. But now she had thrown away all pride. She was willing to give up her freedom, her dignity, even herself, only for her child to survive. The forest around them felt heavier, darker. The crying of the little girl grew softer, weaker, like a candle about to go out. Daniel felt something twist deep inside him. He had seen beggars before, refugees, people asking for food or shelter. But never had he seen someone so desperate that she would offer her entire life in exchange for a single meal for her child. The silence stretched. The woman's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. She lowered her head as if expecting him to reject her, to walk away and leave her in the cold night. She did not ask for herself, only for her daughter. Daniel took a slow step closer. The lamp's light revealed more details. The child's tiny arms, thin as sticks, her lips cracked and dry. He noticed how the woman's hands shook, how her chains rattled softly whenever she moved. She must have escaped from somewhere terrible, carrying her daughter through the wilderness. He felt his throat tighten. "You need food," he said at last, his voice rougher than he intended. The woman lifted her eyes again, wide with surprise, almost not believing his words. Daniel sighed, looking around the empty road, the lonely forest. "Follow me," he said quietly. "I can't promise much, but I have food at home." The alien mother gasped, clutching her child tighter as if protecting her from a dream that might break at any moment. She struggled to her feet, her legs weak, her body trembling. Still she followed him step by step, as if every ounce of strength she had left was for her daughter. The night grew colder, but Daniel's mind burned with questions. Who was she? Where had she come from?
Why had she been chained?
And why did it feel deep inside that by bringing them home his life was about to change forever? The forest stayed silent as they walked away, leaving only the sound of weak footsteps, the faint rattle of chains, and the quiet sobs of a little girl fading into the night. The road to Daniel's small wooden house was long and quiet. The woman followed a few steps behind him, clutching her daughter so tightly it looked as if she feared the child would vanish. Every now and then the little girl gave a weak cough, her head resting against her mother's shoulder. Daniel tried not to look back too often, but he could hear the faint rattle of her chains and the uneven rhythm of her footsteps. When they reached the house, Daniel opened the door and stepped aside. Warmth from a small fire inside spilled out into the cold night. The alien woman froze at the doorway, her silver eyes darting across the room like a trapped animal. Daniel noticed the way she pressed her daughter closer, her shoulders tense as though stepping inside a human's home was a risk greater than the hunger eating at her child. "It's safe," Daniel said simply. His voice was calm but firm. He didn't smile. He didn't move closer. He only stood there waiting. At last she entered. Her bare feet made no sound against the wooden floor. She looked at everything, the shelves, the old tools by the wall, the fire crackling in the small stone hearth. For her, it must have been a strange world. She lowered her daughter onto a worn blanket near the fire, wrapping it around her tiny body. Daniel walked to the kitchen corner and pulled out bread, a jar of soup he had saved, and some dried meat. He placed them on the table and gestured. "Eat," the woman hesitated. Her hands trembled as she picked up a piece of bread, but instead of biting it, she carefully broke it into smaller pieces. She pressed one into her daughter's hands, guiding it to the child's lips. The girl chewed slowly, weakly, her eyes fluttering as if every bite was a fight to stay alive. Only when the child had swallowed did the woman take a small bite herself. Daniel leaned against the wall, arms crossed, watching. Something about the way she acted struck him deeply. She hadn't lied, her only concern was the child. She wasn't greedy. She wasn't desperate for herself. Everything she begged for was for the little girl. After some minutes, when the girl's color looked a little better, the woman finally raised her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. Her voice cracked with exhaustion. Then almost at once her expression hardened as if she remembered her own promise. She lowered her head and spoke again, the words spilling out in broken human language. "I will stay quiet. I will work. I will clean. I will cook. I will be in your bed if you want. Only," her voice trembled, "only keep my daughter alive." Daniel's chest tightened. The way she said it, so cold, so hopeless, was like a knife. It wasn't an offer. It was surrender. She had given up everything she was. She was offering herself like an object because she thought there was no other way. For a long moment, Daniel said nothing. He could see the firelight reflecting in her wet eyes. He could see the bruises on her wrists where the chains had cut deep, and he realized she truly believed this was the only bargain left to her. He finally shook his head. "I didn't bring you here for that." His voice was quiet but sharp. The woman blinked, confused. Her lips parted slightly as if she didn't understand. She stared at him with disbelief, waiting for the trap, waiting for the hidden cruelty. Daniel sighed and crouched near the fire, looking at the small girl who was now resting, her breathing steadier. "Feed her. Let her grow strong again. That's enough." The alien mother's hands tightened into fists, her body shaking. Not with anger, but with something else. Relief, fear, gratitude. All mixed together. You do not want me?" she asked, her voice nearly breaking. "I want you to let her live," Daniel replied. "That's all." The room grew quiet again. The fire cracked, filling the silence. The woman pulled the blanket tighter around her daughter and lowered her head, hiding her face. Her shoulders quivered, and Daniel realized she was crying silently, the tears she had held back for too long now falling freely. He turned away, giving her space. He wasn't good with tears, not human and not alien, but deep inside something stirred. Something told him this meeting was not chance. He had seen the look in her eyes, the look of someone who had been hunted, broken and abandoned, yet still carried on for the sake of her child. Later, as the fire dimmed and the night deepened, Daniel sat by the window staring out into the darkness. He could hear the soft breathing of the child, finally at rest, and the quiet movements of the alien mother as she lay beside her. He knew tomorrow would bring questions, maybe even danger. Who had chained her? Who would come searching? But for now, one thought repeated in his mind. She begged only for her daughter's life. And he had answered. The next morning came slowly. Pale light spilled across Daniel's small cabin. Birds sang outside, but inside there was only silence. Daniel stirred awake in his chair by the window. He had fallen asleep watching the forest, keeping one ear open in case of trouble. When he turned his head, he saw them. The alien woman lay curled on the floor near the fireplace, her daughter tucked safely in her arms. The child's chest rose and fell in a calm rhythm, no longer the weak gasps of last night. The woman's hair was spread across the blanket, dark and tangled, her face softer in sleep. For a moment, she almost looked human. Daniel stood and stretched his tired body. The floor creaked under his boots and the woman's eyes snapped open instantly. She rose halfway, ready to defend her daughter. Her silver eyes were sharp, full of fear. "It's all right," Daniel said quietly. He raised his hands to show he meant no harm. "You're safe here." Her gaze lingered on him for several tense seconds before she lowered her guard. She sat back down, pulling the blanket tighter around her daughter. She said nothing, but Daniel could feel her mistrust. It was heavy, like smoke in the room. He busied himself with the fire, placing more wood to keep the warmth alive. Then he prepared a small breakfast, boiled potatoes, bread, and a pot of tea. He placed it on the table and nodded. "Eat." The woman hesitated again, then carefully woke her daughter. The child blinked, rubbed her eyes, and sat up with a small yawn. Daniel noticed she looked better already. Her cheeks had more color. She even reached out for the bread without waiting. The woman guided her, smiling faintly when her daughter ate with more energy than the night before. But when Daniel pushed the plate closer to the woman, she shook her head. "For her," she whispered. Daniel frowned. "You need strength too. Take it." Slowly she obeyed, though every bite she took seemed guilty, as if she was stealing food meant for her child. The silence between them was deep. Daniel wanted to ask questions. Who chained you? Why did you run? Where did you come from? But he held back. He could see she wasn't ready. He knew that if he pressed her too hard, she might vanish into the forest with her daughter, even if it meant dying out there. After breakfast, she surprised him. She gathered the plates without being asked and cleaned them carefully at the basin. Her movements were quiet, efficient, almost practiced. Then she turned to sweep the floor with a small brush, straightening the blankets, tending to the fire. She didn't look at him once. Daniel understood. This was her silent agreement. She would work, stay useful, stay invisible. No complaints, no demands. But every time she moved, he could hear the faint clink of the broken chains around her wrists. The sound made his chest tighten. She could have thrown them away in the forest, yet she still wore them. Maybe she couldn't remove them, or maybe she didn't want to forget. By afternoon, Daniel decided to test the silence. He sat at the table and said, "What's her name?" The woman froze. She looked at him with wide eyes as if he had spoken forbidden words. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. Finally, she whispered, "Lyra." Daniel glanced at the child, who was now playing quietly with a small piece of wood. "Lyra," he repeated. "Pretty name." The woman lowered her gaze again, whispering something in her own language. He guessed it was a prayer. The day passed like that, quiet, cautious, with unspoken rules. She did not ask for anything. He did not push her. When night came, Daniel gave her another blanket and pointed to the bed. "You and Lyra can use it," he said. Her head snapped up, startled. She shook it firmly. "No, floor is fine," Daniel sighed. He didn't argue. He let her choose. But inside he felt a mix of frustration and respect. She refused comfort for herself. Maybe she thought it was a trap. Or maybe she felt she didn't deserve it. Later, when the cabin grew dark again, Daniel watched them as they slept. The child curled against her mother, safe for the first time in who knows how long. The woman's face, even in sleep, carried lines of fear like shadows that never left. Daniel leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. He knew this couldn't last forever. The world outside was dangerous. If someone had chained her once, they might come looking again. And if they found her here, they would find him too. But then he looked again at the child, her tiny hand resting on her mother's arm, her lips curved in a small, peaceful smile. And Daniel made an unspoken promise to himself. If trouble came, he would not stand aside. The alien mother didn't know it yet. But her silent agreement wasn't one-sided anymore. He had silently agreed too. Days passed, and the cabin settled into a strange rhythm. Daniel worked outside, cutting wood, fixing fences, and checking his traps, while inside the alien woman kept herself busy. She cleaned, cooked with whatever food he brought, and watched over her daughter Lyra with sharp, protective eyes. They rarely spoke. The silence between them was thick, like a wall neither dared to break. Daniel didn't mind silence. He had lived alone for years, but he couldn't ignore the weight in her eyes, the shadow that never lifted. One evening, rain fell hard on the roof, a steady drumming that made the small cabin feel even smaller. Daniel sat at the table, sharpening his knife. Across from him, the woman mended one of Lyra's torn clothes with careful hands. The child slept near the fire, wrapped in blankets. The chains on her wrists clinked softly with each movement. Daniel finally asked, his voice steady, "Why do you still wear those?" The woman froze. For a long moment, she didn't move. Her fingers tightened around the fabric. Daniel thought she would ignore him, but then she spoke, her voice low and hollow. "I cannot forget," she whispered. "If I forget, I will lose her." Daniel frowned, not understanding. "Lose her? She's right there." He nodded at Lyra, who stirred lightly in her sleep. The woman shook her head, tears threatening in her silver eyes. "Not always. I lost her once." The knife paused in Daniel's hand. He leaned forward, waiting. Her words came slowly, like stones dragged from deep water. "My people. They hated us. Lyra is different. Her father was not one of them. They called her impure. They called me a traitor." Daniel's chest tightened. He had guessed something like this, but hearing it from her lips was heavier than he imagined. "They took us," she continued, her voice trembling. "They chained me, dragged me before the council. They tore her away from me. They said they would erase her blood." Her hand shook so badly the needle slipped, pricking her finger. She didn't even flinch. "They put me in the cages. They said I would watch her die." Daniel felt anger rise inside him, hot and sharp. He had seen cruelty in men before, but this, turning against a mother and child because of blood, was something else entirely. "But she's alive," Daniel said firmly. "You have her now." The woman let out a broken laugh, bitter and thin. "Because I ran. Because I fought like an animal. I broke my chains and stole her back. And now we are hunted. No place, no tribe, no name. Only chains." She lifted her wrists, letting the broken metal catch the firelight. "These remind me. If I forget the pain, I will forget the cost, and then I will fail her again." Her shoulders trembled. She covered her face with her hands, silent tears slipping through her fingers. For the first time, Daniel saw her not as a stranger, not as an alien, but as a mother who had walked through hell. The rain outside grew louder, filling the silence between her sobs. Daniel put the knife down. Slowly, carefully, he stood and walked to the hearth. He poured hot tea into a cup and set it gently on the table near her. "Drink," he said quietly. She looked up at him with red, swollen eyes. For a moment she hesitated, then took the cup with trembling hands. She sipped and her breathing steadied. Daniel sat back down. He didn't press her with more questions. He didn't need to. He understood enough. She was broken but not defeated. She had chosen chains over freedom, shame over pride, all to protect her daughter. That night, long after the woman and Lyra had fallen asleep, Daniel stayed awake by the fire. He couldn't shake the picture her words painted. The cages, the council, the child ripped away. He thought of the look on her face when she spoke of erasing her daughter. And for the first time since bringing them home, Daniel felt something heavier than pity. He felt responsibility. If her people came, they would not stop. They would hunt her. They would take Lyra again. Daniel's hand tightened around the hilt of his knife. He wasn't sure when the decision had formed in his heart, but it was there now, clear as the firelight. If they came for her again, they would have to go through him first. The rain slowed near dawn, leaving the air damp and heavy. The forest outside waited in silence. Inside the cabin, a fragile family slept. One man, one broken mother, and one child who had been saved once but could be lost again. And though Daniel didn't say it out loud, one truth had already taken root in him. Their past might have been chains, but their future would not be. Morning sunlight touched the edges of the cabin, spilling golden light across the floor. Lyra woke first, rubbing her eyes and blinking at the brightness. For the first time since Daniel had met her, she gave a small laugh, a soft, shy sound that echoed like music in the quiet cabin. Daniel, who was fixing the door hinges outside, heard it. The sound made him pause. He leaned against the frame and watched through the open door. The little girl was chasing a moth that had slipped in through the cracks, her tiny feet pattering against the wood. Her mother sat close by, her silver eyes tired but softer now as she watched her daughter play. It was a simple scene, but to Daniel it felt powerful. Just a few nights ago, this child had been close to death, trembling in the cold. Now here she was, laughing like any child should. He smiled faintly, then went back to work. But inside, something in him shifted. As days turned into weeks, the rhythm of life in the cabin changed. The alien woman, who still had not shared her own name, kept her silent promise. She cooked with quiet skill, cleaning whatever Daniel brought back. When he returned from the forest with game or roots, she always found a way to stretch it further, making sure Lyra ate first. Daniel noticed her hands were steady in the kitchen, though they trembled when strangers passed along the road. He noticed the way she still woke at the smallest sound in the night, holding her daughter close until she was sure danger had passed. But he also noticed other things. When Lyra learned how to feed the chickens, her laughter filled the yard. When Daniel built a small swing from a rope and plank, the child's joy was so pure it made even her mother smile, though quickly she hid it behind lowered eyes. Bit by bit, the silence between them cracked. One evening, while preparing stew, the woman spoke without lifting her gaze.
"Why do you live alone?"
Daniel blinked at her sudden question. He sat at the table, cleaning his rifle. "Because people talk too much," he said simply. A faint sound escaped her lips, not quite laughter, but close. "You are different," she said quietly. Daniel looked at her. She didn't explain, but she didn't need to. Different meant he wasn't cruel, not like the ones who had chained her. Lyra grew stronger with each passing day. She followed Daniel everywhere, tugging on his sleeve when he chopped wood, giggling when he carried her on his shoulders. At night, she curled between her mother and the fire, safe and warm. Sometimes Daniel caught himself staring. A child's trust was a fragile thing, yet Lyra had given it to him so easily. And her mother, though she spoke little, there was a change in her eyes. The hard, cold fear had softened into something else, a fragile hope. One night, when the stars burned bright over the forest, Lyra pointed at the sky. "Mama," she said, her voice light with wonder. "Look!" The woman lifted her head and followed her daughter's finger. For a brief moment, her face lit up with the same wonder, the same innocence her daughter carried. Daniel saw it and thought, she deserves more than chains. She deserves to live free like this child, but peace never came without shadows. One afternoon, Daniel found Lyra sitting on the porch steps, clutching her small toy made from twigs. She looked worried. When he crouched down, she whispered, "Mama cries when she thinks I'm sleeping." Daniel's chest tightened. He didn't know what to say. He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Your mama is strong," he said softly. "Stronger than anyone I've ever met." The child nodded as if believing him made it true. Later that night, when the woman sat alone by the fire, Daniel asked gently, "Why hide your name?" She looked at him for a long time, as if weighing whether to trust him. Finally, she whispered, "Soraya." Daniel repeated it, "Soraya." The name rolled off his tongue easily, carrying weight and dignity. Her eyes widened slightly, as if surprised he said it with respect and not scorn. From that night forward, he no longer thought of her as just the alien woman. She was Soraya. A mother, a survivor. The bond between them deepened, silent but strong. Soraya no longer flinched every time Daniel moved too quickly. She no longer kept Lyra behind her at all times. Slowly, she began to share small stories about the flowers of her world, about the songs mothers used to sing to children, about the taste of fruits Daniel had never known. And Daniel, in turn, shared pieces of his own past, his quiet life, his long solitude, and the loss of his own family in a war long ago. Though different, their pain mirrored each other's. One evening, as the three of them ate together, Lyra leaned against Daniel's arm and smiled up at him. "Papa," she said softly, as if the word had slipped out without thought. Daniel froze. Soraya's eyes widened. The room fell into silence, but then, instead of anger or correction, Soraya only lowered her gaze, her lips trembling. She did not stop her daughter. She did not pull her away. Daniel's heart beat hard. He didn't correct her either. He only placed a gentle hand on Lyra's head, swallowing the lump in his throat. The bond was no longer silent. It was alive, fragile, and growing stronger every day. But deep inside, Daniel knew this bond would soon be tested, because in a world that hated Soraya and her child, love and safety were treasures someone always tried to take away. The days of quiet did not last. It began with signs so small that Daniel almost ignored them. A broken branch on the trail where no animal had passed, ashes from a fire near the river that was not his, strange tracks in the mud, too many feet moving too carefully. Daniel knew what it meant. Someone was out there, watching, searching. Inside the cabin, life went on as if nothing had changed. Lyra played in the yard laughing as she chased the chickens. Soraya mended clothes by the fire, humming a soft lullaby in her own tongue. But Daniel's eyes kept drifting to the tree line, his hand always close to his rifle. One evening, as the sun sank behind the forest, Soraya noticed his tension. She put down her needle and looked at him, her silver eyes sharp. "You saw something," she said quietly. Daniel nodded. "Tracks, not human settlers." "Too careful." Her face paled. Her hands clenched into fists. "They have found us." Lyra peeked from behind her mother, sensing the fear in her voice. "Mama?" Soraya forced a smile for her daughter, but her voice shook. "Go inside, little one." When Lyra was gone, Soraya turned to Daniel. "You do not understand. They will not stop. They will take her again. They will kill me this time." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Not while you're here." But Soraya shook her head, her chains clinking. "You do not know them. They are hunters. They erase those who shame them. I ran once. They will not let me run again." Her voice broke and she pressed her hands over her face. "I should go. If I leave, they will not harm you. They will not take your home." Daniel stood, his shadow stretching long in the firelight. His voice was steady, almost cold. "This is my home. If they want it, they'll have to fight me for it." Soraya lowered her hand slowly, staring at him in disbelief. No one had ever stood for her before. No one had ever claimed her safety as their own. That night was restless. Daniel sat awake, sharpening his knife and checking his rifle. The forest was too quiet, as if holding its breath. Soraya lay with her daughter. But she did not sleep either. She listened to every sound, every rustle of the wind, her heart pounding with dread. When dawn broke, the first sign came. A whistle cut through the trees, long, low, like a signal. Daniel was already on his feet. He motioned for Soraya to stay inside with Lyra. 3 figures emerged from the forest. Tall, cloaked, their faces hidden, but their silver skin gleamed faintly in the light. Soraya gasped when she saw them, her people. The hunters. One stepped forward, his voice sharp. "Give her back, human. The traitor and her spawn do not belong here." Daniel stood firm, rifle in hand. "She belongs where she's safe. And she's safe with me." The hunter's eyes narrowed. "You protect filth. She offered herself to you, did she not? That is all she is worth. But the child, her blood is poison. We will erase her." Inside the cabin, Soraya clutched Lyra tightly, tears burning in her eyes. She wanted to scream, to beg, but her voice would not come. All she could hear was Daniel's steady voice outside. "You'll have to erase me first," he said. The standoff stretched. The hunters shifted, hands near their weapons. Daniel's finger rested on the trigger. The air between them felt heavy, like the moment before a storm. Then, unexpectedly, one of the hunters spat on the ground. "Foolish human. Do you think you can fight us all?" Daniel's eyes did not waver. "I don't have to fight all. Just the first one who steps forward." Something in his calm made them hesitate. They were hunters, yes, but they were not used to prey standing tall. They expected fear, surrender, not defiance. Finally, the leader snarled, "We will return. And when we do, not even your blood will save them." With that, they melted back into the trees, leaving only silence. Daniel lowered his rifle slowly, his muscles tense. He stepped back into the cabin. Soraya was waiting, her arms around Lyra, her face pale as stone. "They will come back," she whispered. Daniel nodded. "Then we'll be ready." Soraya's eyes filled with tears, but there was something else too, something he had not seen before. Trust. For the first time, she whispered his name. "Daniel, why? Why risk everything for us?" He looked at Lyra, who clung to her mother's side, her small eyes wide with fear. Then he looked back at Soraya. "Because no one should beg for their child's life," he said quietly. "Not in front of me. Not ever again." The words settled between them, stronger than any oath. That night, as the forest grew dark again, the cabin felt different. Danger pressed close, but so did something else. An unspoken bond, stronger than chains, stronger than fear. The hunters would return. The storm was coming, but Daniel was no longer just a man alone. He was their shield now, and he would not break. The night before the storm, the cabin was heavy with silence. The fire burned low, throwing restless shadows against the walls. Outside, the forest whispered as if carrying warnings through the wind. Daniel sat at the table, his rifle across his knees. His jaw was tight, his eyes sharp. He could feel it. The hunters would not wait long. They would return soon, and this time they would not walk away with threats. Across the room, Soraya sat with Lyra curled in her lap. The little girl had finally fallen asleep, her small hand gripping her mother's chain as if afraid she might vanish in the night. Soraya stroked her daughter's hair, her silver eyes fixed on Daniel. "You should not do this," she whispered. Daniel didn't look up. "Do what?" "Stand between us and death," she said softly. "We are not your blood. We are not your people. If you let them take us, they will leave you in peace." At that, Daniel finally looked at her. His voice was steady but full of iron. "Peace is worthless if I watch a child dragged away. I won't live that way." Her lips trembled, but no words came. For a long time she simply stared at him, her heart torn between fear and something else, something fragile, growing, impossible to deny. The next morning, the forest broke into chaos. They came with the rising sun, 6 hunters, cloaked and armed, their silver skin gleaming like blades. They moved fast, surrounding the cabin with deadly precision. Their leader stepped forward, his voice sharp as stone. "This is the end, human. Give her up, or die with her." Daniel stepped out of the cabin, rifle in hand. He stood tall, not moving, not flinching. Behind him, Soraya clutched Lyra close, her body trembling. "You'll have to kill me first," Daniel said, his voice calm but cutting. The hunters sneered. "So be it." They rushed. The world exploded into fire and noise. Daniel fired, the blast echoing through the trees. One hunter dropped, but the others pressed forward. Soraya screamed, pulling Lyra inside. But one hunter broke past Daniel and forced the cabin door open. Soraya grabbed the fire iron from the hearth and swung with all her strength. The blow cracked against the hunter's head, dropping him to the floor. Chains rattling, breath ragged, she stood over him, eyes blazing with a fury Daniel had never seen. Outside, Daniel fought like a man with nothing to lose. His rifle emptied fast, and he drew his knife, slashing and striking with raw desperation. Blood splattered the earth, silver and red mixing in the dirt. For every strike he gave, another came back harder, but he refused to fall. One hunter pinned him down, blade pressing against his throat. Daniel gritted his teeth, muscles straining, when suddenly the chain of Soraya's broken shackle whipped across the hunter's face. She had leapt into the fight, dragging him away with feral strength. Daniel surged back up, stabbing deep. The hunter fell, writhing. The battle was chaos, grunts, screams, the clash of metal. Soraya fought like a mother possessed, every strike fueled by the fear of losing her child again. Daniel fought with grim determination, every blow a promise that no one would take them while he still breathed. Finally, only one hunter remained. The leader. He stood bleeding, but his eyes burned with hate. He pointed at Soraya. "You cannot run forever, traitor. Your blood and her blood will stain the earth." Daniel stepped in front of her, knife raised, his chest heaving. "Over my dead body." The leader lunged. Steel flashed. For a heartbeat. Time slowed. Soraya screamed, Lyra cried out. Daniel's arm swung, then silence. The leader fell, the knife buried deep in his chest. The forest went still. Daniel staggered, his body trembling with exhaustion, his clothes torn and bloodied. Soraya caught him before he fell, her chains clinking as she wrapped her arms around him. For the first time, she held him not with fear but with something stronger. "You are mad," she whispered through her tears. "Mad and brave." Daniel gave a weak laugh. "You're welcome." Lyra ran to them, her small arms wrapping around both of them. "Papa!" she cried, her voice breaking with relief. Soraya froze. The word cut through her like lightning. For so long she had fought alone, believed no one would ever share her burden. But here was her daughter calling this human father. And here was this man standing between them and death, bleeding for them, refusing to let them go. In that moment, Soraya made her choice. She would no longer carry her chains alone. She lifted her head, silver eyes shining with tears. "We are yours, Daniel," she whispered, "if you will have us." He looked at her, weary but steady, and nodded. "Always." The hunters were gone, their bodies left for the forest to claim. The cabin stood battered but alive, sheltering 3 souls bound not by blood, but by something deeper: sacrifice, trust, and love, born in the darkest of nights. Soraya no longer needed her chains to remember. She had something stronger now: a home, a bond, a promise. And Daniel, once a man alone, now had a family worth fighting for, forever.